This is Money Made Simple, the financial podcast that keeps it simple and gets to the point.
Kia ora and welcome to Money Made Simple, brought to you by Simplicity. Hi Liv.
Hi Jennie.
So today we're tackling a question that many people think about, might even get the answer, but they often put off taking action on it.
Yeah.
And that is, how do I switch or transfer between KiwiSaver providers? And is there a right or wrong time to do it?
Yeah. So transferring or switching between providers might seem quite complicated or a really big deal, but it's actually pretty easy, and most of the admin happens behind the scenes, right? Rather than by the person switching or transferring.
Yeah. So it is a big decision, but it's not a big deal. And in this episode, we're going to go over why people might want to transfer providers, like what the reasons are, what actually happens behind the scenes, so peek behind the curtain, and then we're going to look at 5 of the sort of most common worries that people have about this whole process.
Yeah. But let's start with a couple of definitions, so we're all kind of on the same page about what we're talking about.
Good idea.
Cool. So number 1 would be a KiwiSaver provider or a KiwiSaver manager. And this is the company that manages your KiwiSaver scheme. So there are around, I think, 30-ish licensed providers. You can find them on IRD website, or sorted.org also have a list, our favourites.
The next word would be fund. So providers have KiwiSaver funds, and your KiwiSaver fund is the investment option that your money is invested into. Okay. So each fund, like a conservative, balanced or high growth fund, has a different mix of assets. We've talked about assets, so cash, bonds, property, shares, those kind of things, different mix, and that determines the level of risk and also volatility that the fund might be exposed to, so how much the balance may fluctuate over time, and you're trying to pick the fund that suits.
Cool.
The other thing then I think we should define is the difference between transferring between providers and switching fund types.
Yeah, so lots of people talk about switching KiwiSaver. We do it on our website and all sorts of things. So switching providers or transferring providers mean the same thing. This means choosing a new KiwiSaver scheme offered by that new KiwiSaver manager and moving your whole investment balance to them, right?
Exactly. And switching funds is something you normally do within a provider. So say you're with the Simplicity Conservative Fund and you choose to switch into the High Growth Fund, for example. So the scheme and the manager doesn't change. You've just chosen a new fund and a different way of investing your savings.
Yes, that alters how your savings are invested, right? That mix
the different
of assets.
Mix. Yeah.
This episode, though, we're not going to talk about switching funds within a provider. We're going to talk about...
We'll do that another day.
Yes, we're talking about switching or transferring between providers.
Exactly. Keep it clear. We've only got 15 to 20 minutes, so we need to stay focused. So what, Liv, are the main reasons why people would want to transfer KiwiSaver providers?
Many reasons, but usually, in a nutshell, people would think about transferring between KiwiSaver providers because something no longer is quite the right fit with your current provider. Lots of people don't even know who their current provider is. So that might be that you've suddenly realised that you do want to understand and you do want to be with the right provider. But usually it's because...
you're looking for a change.
Exactly. So a couple of specific reasons that people would change, and this is in no particular order, would be performance concerns. So this wouldn't be short-term fluctuations like the market's dropped, which we've seen recently, but more like consistent underperformance relative to similar funds of other providers.
Yeah.
Another one would be any concerns about your level of fees or the value for money that your current provider provides you. So, for example, over time, even little differences in fees, like between 0.25 and 1%, which seems like really small, can have really large impacts over time. Value for money in general, you might not feel like you're getting value for money in terms of the fees you pay to your provider versus what you get from them.
And the other one might be around investment approach. You want to invest in a
Passively managed
fund, or the opposite. You want to invest in an actively managed fund. And there might be some ethical factors about the types of things that you're invested in, or you're just looking for a different sort of asset mix. So that might be one reason, is that sort of investment approach. The other one is the range of funds available. So you said there's 30 KiwiSaver providers. There's 300 and something funds available,
That's
which
huge,
is amazing.
Yep.
And so maybe you're looking for a particular type of fund and your current provider doesn't have that fund.
Easy.
Yeah.
A couple more reasons could be the service or the tools that your current provider provides. So you might want a better digital experience, better communication.
Maybe your provider doesn't have a really awesome podcast and you're looking for a provider that does.
Yeah, maybe you're looking for a little bit more transparency in where your money's invested, or you might be looking for personalised advice. So yeah, a service and tools kind of in general can be part of that. And finally, values alignment. So you want your money invested in line with your own principles, and you might feel like your provider, whoever that is, might not be investing in the way that you kind of personally see.
Yeah. So those are all pretty fair reasons. I'm sure there'll be others we've missed. But what actually happens is probably the thing that causes people the most stress about this process.
It's an unknown, right?
Yeah. So let's talk about what's involved with transferring or switching providers. Like you said, it's a lot more simple in some ways than people think, but the most important thing and the bit that takes the most time is choosing your new provider. There are lots of providers and they have that huge range of funds. You do need to spend the time doing your research so you're really comfortable with that decision. There's some great tools out there like sorted.org.nz have an awesome comparison tool where you can look at the different providers, the funds they have, the fees that they charge, the services that they provide, past returns. So that's a really, really great tool. And then once you've done all that research and made that decision, then you can initiate the process.
If you're just overwhelmed and unsure, we would recommend seeking independent financial advice.
Absolutely.
But in general, once you actually have decided, you don't actually then need to manage all of the admin in terms of transferring to a new provider, right? It's not all done by you.
No, actually that part's quite simple. What you have to do is go to the new provider and they will have generally a fairly simple onboarding or joining process. It's probably going to be an online form of some kind. You're going to need the usual kind of stuff, your IRD number, some kind of photo ID, maybe proof of address, and then you're just going to need to complete that paperwork.
Which is probably going to take 5 or 10 minutes usually, right?
Yep, and some of the verification checks of your ID can be done automatically online as part of that process. Sometimes that might take a little bit longer, but yeah, generally that happens pretty quickly.
Yeah. And I think the one thing that people often don't realise is that you don't have to do anything with your old provider, right? You don't have to call them and tell them you're leaving or email them or anything.
No awkward breakup conversation. You're just ghosting your old provider.
You can ghost. This is one time where it's appropriate.
Yes. Yeah. Once you've initiated the process, the new provider is going to get in touch with the IRD and say that they've had instructions that you want to move your KiwiSaver. The IRD will get into touch with your current provider. So once all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, then your old provider sells your investments or your units in the fund.
Yep.
Turn that into cash. The cash is transferred via the IRD to your new provider.
Right.
Then they invest that into the fund of your choice, and then 2 days or so later you should see that investment in your new KiwiSaver provider account.
Okay. So that whole process that you're talking about with the old provider, the IRD and the new provider, that shouldn't generally take longer than 10 working days to complete, right? So it's not instant. You don't sign up and then you're suddenly with your new provider the next day, but it doesn't take months or weeks or anything like that.
No. I mean, there's things that have to happen, right? There's notifications that are happening, there's verifications, there's investments being sold and then bought again. But that generally happens, like you said, in less than 10 working days. And one of the times where things can take a little bit longer is if there's a slight mismatch in information, like maybe your addresses don't quite match up, or maybe your name has changed, so the details that you put into your new fund are different to the ones that your current provider has, that kind of stuff. So really little things can hold up the process.
So it's 10 working days in general-ish, give or take both upper and lower limits.
We could never be definitive about these things.
Exactly. But your money is not generally out of the market for that whole period of time, right?
No, because there's that admin that's happening on sort of either end. Generally speaking, it would be around 5 days or more out of the market, but not
again,
the full.
We can't give exact times,
no,
right?
But very unlikely to be the full 10 days.
So now we know in a nutshell how the process works. But what stops people from actually switching or transferring between providers or makes them nervous to actually hit that button?
Yeah, there are lots of stresses. One of the big ones is because people don't actually understand that process, and they worry that their money is sitting in some kind of investment purgatory for this period of time, which can be quite nerve-wracking. For lots of us, it's our biggest asset. So it's completely normal to be concerned about these things. But KiwiSaver was designed to be able to be moved around fairly easily. It's your money and you can move it. And actually thousands of Kiwis every month transfer their KiwiSaver funds. So that's happening all the time. But let's have a look at some of those concerns or worries
that stop people from actually making the transfer. Cool. Okay, number one, I think that we see most commonly, if I transfer, I will lock in my losses. So people see their balance down because there's been a blip in the market or for whatever reason, and they think, if I move now, I will be making the loss real.
Yeah, so I'll wait. And technically, when you transfer between providers, your current investments are sold and your balance moves across, you are actually crystallising your losses.
Okay,
so this isn't actually a myth, but that's not the important part. The important part is that your current balance already reflects those losses.
So what's happened has happened.
What's happened has happened, and what you really need to focus on is, or what the real question is whether you're making the right decision for the future outcome of your savings. So don't be
backward looking. I did exactly this. So I was with a provider called Juno, an actively managed fund, which doesn't actually exist anymore, and during the COVID period, they had a worse performance blip than most. So comparing to other funds in the market, were really bad. I realised after doing my research that I wanted to move to a passively managed fund. I felt like over the long run that would be better for long-term performance potential.
Which is great. You've done your research and you've made a good decision.
However, I was paralysed by the fact that they had done worse than the rest of the market. And I didn't really think about it too much, but I had this idea that they would work really hard to kind of remedy their mistakes. And it took me over a year to switch to a passively managed fund and provider.
Had your balance recovered?
No, not more than what other funds had done. So I was expecting, because of this poor performance, that they'd work harder or do more.
But they're still operating in the same market, aren't
exactly.
they?
So I think the real question isn't, will I lock in losses? Because that does happen whenever investments are sold anyway. It's more like, what's the most suitable fund provider for me going forward? So from here on in, what do I believe in is the best move for me?
Yeah. And I think that's really hard for people to do. It was obviously you're a smart person, but still you couldn't make the move. And you probably, yes. And if you'd just moved, when you thought about it and just got on with your life.
I think I might have been better off, but I don't dwell on the past. Yeah. Let's move on to worry number 2. That I'm going to be out of the market and lose potential gains or returns while I'm out of the market.
Yeah. And that makes sense because you are going to be out of the market for a time, and that can be a little bit scary. But it's fairly brief in the grand scheme of things, around 5 to 10 days, say. But the markets are moving up and down every single day. Over the long term, a few days out of the market isn't going to be the main driver of your long-term outcomes.
And it's usually less than what people think. It's not that whole time, as we talked about.
Yeah. And so, like the previous concern that people had about locking in the losses, again, it's about that long-term view. So yes, you're going to be out of the market for a short period of time, but then your money is going to be invested in the way that you want it, and hopefully a fund that's fit for your long-term goals. So you're going to be better off.
Yeah, so the fees, the values, the fund choice, etc., all those things that we talked about, that long-term impact will very likely outweigh the short-term days out of the market.
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. Worry number 3?
Worry number 3 is that my employer contributions won't go through or will get lost somehow. Yes.
So people worry that their employer won't know where to send the contributions to their new provider. They might miss out on some. They might get lost in translation if you get paid during that time. But that's not true, right?
No, that's not true. Your contributions will automatically be redirected to your new provider because everything goes through the IRD. You don't need to worry. The IRD has been notified that you've made that change. Your contributions go to them and then they redirect them to the right place. If it would happen, I'd say fairly regularly, that someone's payday would happen in that period of time, that the transfer is happening, then they'll just hold them until that transfer has been completed and then your contributions will be added. The other thing that people worry about is government contributions. So we've talked about this quite a lot. You have to do certain things to be eligible for the government contribution, and one of them is to contribute contribute enough yourself at $1,043. The contributions that you've already made via your old provider, they do count towards that year. So that information
doesn't reset.
No, it doesn't reset. They don't get lost. You are still on your way to being eligible for that full government contribution. So you don't have to worry about that.
Number 4, transferring KiwiSaver providers is complicated and or risky.
Yeah, I get that one too, because it's money and it's retirement and it's investing and it's lots of kind of scary things.
And it might be a lot of your savings, right?
Absolutely. But in practice, the actual bit that you have to do after you've done your research and chosen your new provider only takes 5 or so minutes online.
Yep.
And then all of the admin, the breaking up with your old provider, all of that stuff is done by your new provider.
Yeah. So that decision shouldn't be taken lightly, right? Seek advice again if you're not sure. But once you are ready to make that decision, as we said, the system was designed to be portable. It was designed to be simple and easy for people to move between providers.
Yeah. And worry number 5, should I wait for the perfect time? Does the perfect time exist? Would be worry number 5.
We all know the answer to that question, timing the market.
The answer is no, the perfect time does not exist. You relate to it. You've just shared your experience.
There's a risk that people won't ever change because they're still waiting and waiting, like I did for a year. I hear it from mates. We hear it from members all the time. I'm just waiting until X.
And if you think about the markets over the last few years, like trying to pick when the perfect time would be a nightmare, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the perfect time is probably if the fund and the provider that you're with now is not fit for purpose and you're not happy, the time is now.
Yeah. So better to focus on the stuff that you can control, the fees that you pay, your general risk tolerance, the fund fit, whether they've got the right funds for you, a provider that you're comfortable with in terms of values, in terms of investment approach, if they suit your needs. So rather than trying to pick the perfect week, pick the right provider for you.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. So if we take all of that, let's turn it into some practical tips around what people should do before they transfer between KiwiSaver providers. Yeah. So be clear on what you're actually changing. So when you move to a new provider, you're not just swapping the name on the tin or the app that you're using, you're actually choosing a new fund. So even if it's called Growth Fund and you're moving into a different provider's Growth Fund, it won't necessarily be identical to your old one.
That's a really good point, that it is not apples for apples. It might be the same named fund, it might be a growth fund, but there may be some differences in the types of assets that you're invested in.
Yeah, and their investment styles, the exclusions across their investments can differ. So you do need to review whatever you're going into your new fund from your new provider carefully. Read the PDS, the product disclosure statement.
Oh, yeah, definitely read that.
And of course, you could consider getting independent advice.
Yeah.
Cool. Then there's fees.
Yes, fees really, really matter. Over the years, most of us are investing in KiwiSaver for decades. And it's one of the few levers in this whole KiwiSaver game that isn't unpredictable. You can see the fees that you're going to be charged. So yes, that's be very aware of that.
Can and will bounce around, especially the higher risk type fund you're in. But fee savings can kind of quietly work away in the background, right? Keeping more of your money invested rather than going to fees. It's also worth checking whether you are getting what you see as value for money beyond just the fees and returns. Ethical investing, like we talked about, transparency, service. Do you want to be able to speak to someone really quickly and easily when you have issues?
So if you think about all of these things before you make the switch, you're not going to be wanting to transfer your provider again in a year. Yeah. You've really gone through all of those different factors to make a good decision for yourself. And different providers suit different people.
Yes, it's about choosing what's right for you across a number of factors, right?
And one tiny little hot tip would be, if you decide to transfer providers, make sure all your details match what the IRD, the information that they have. So if you've changed your name or some other detail recently, just make sure that's all lined up, and then that means the process is going to go a bit smoother.
Worth logging into my AR and having a quick check before you initiate any kind of transfer process.
Yeah, and then if you do have a name change, for example, just having the paperwork ready to go.
Cool. Let's wrap it up there. In a nutshell, transferring providers it's a really big decision to make and shouldn't be taken lightly, but once you actually initiate the process, it's quick and easy and mostly handled behind the scenes, right?
Yes, and I think it's important to remember that most KiwiSaver outcomes are won by doing the simple things consistently, so not by trying to outsmart the market or pick the perfect time. The key is choosing your provider for long-term fit, for fees, fund options, values and services, and also staying calm during moments of volatility and not making this important decision in a moment of panic.
Amazing. Cool. So thanks for tuning in, and we will catch you next time.
Okay, ka kite.
This podcast contains personal opinions and is intended to provide educational information only. It doesn't relate to your particular financial situation or goals and is not financial advice or recommendations. Simplicity New Zealand Limited is the issuer of the Simplicity KiwiSaver scheme and investment funds. For product disclosure statements, please visit Simplicity's website simplicity.kiwi.